Hey everyone, how many of you are feeling anxious when you turn 50 about death? I think those were one of the things that a lot of us don't want to discuss when we get to that big 5-0. And I can see why, because I had struggled with this for a while, ever since I turned 50. And I think it's a conversation that we all need to have and that we all need to face one time or another, because it's nothing we can do to stop it. And in this video, I want to show you how thinking about death can actually bring you much more clarity and be a lot more freeing and completely change how you live the rest of your life. And think about death is, I think it's, for at least for in Chinese culture, right? It's very taboo, and my parents never liked to talk about it. Even discussing, burial plots and stuff like that was very uncomfortable, and also very uncomfortable for me as well, because I didn't want to think about it as well. So we never talked about it in the family. There was even the colors of the flowers that you send for Mother's Day, that can have a certain meaning, and if you send a certain color, it could mean death as well. So there's a lot of those, I guess, superstitions in the Chinese culture surrounding death. And I think for a lot of people, it's a very uneasy conversation to have. And when I turned 50, that really, that feeling of running out of time really hit me for the first time, because prior to that, I never thought too much about it. I always thought there's lots of time left for me to live. I don't have to think about that. But 50 was really the big milestone. At first, initially, it was kind of like, okay, I'm 50, I can't believe I'm here. And then 52 came, and then 55 came, and then you start to see parents start to age, friends start to get diseases, and you start to think about, wow, you know what, maybe I shouldn't be so laid back about this issue. So I was no longer that 18-year-old or even that 30-year-old anymore that thought about that thought I had a lot of time left. And for the first time in my life, I can actually see the finish line, and it was getting more real every day. And that brought about a lot of anxiety. It started also bring up a lot of questions. Start to question myself. Did I achieve enough professionally? Am I happy at this stage in life on what I've accomplished? Did I live life to the fullest? And did I do enough? Did I love enough? And will I live a healthy old age, or will I wither away in an old folks home? I mean, these are the questions and fears that drove me. And there was also, will I have enough money to live till the day I die? And things like, how would I handle my parents aging? All those fears start to get heightened a little bit more. And I think a lot of us also fear our professional decline at work, because you work so hard and you're used to being the most senior person in your company. And then all of a sudden, there's ageism starts to come in. Maybe you might have a boss that's younger than you, that's a different generation, and your values and your way of thinking don't align. I know friends of mine who have a lot of conflict with their younger bosses and can't wait to retire because they just don't get along. They just don't share the same views as us Generation Xers. And I think that leads to a feeling of losing or feeling relevant at work. And I think a lot of the identity that you spent building over the years, you start to question it, because that's all you do for all these decades. And I think it's important to remember that we should try not to hang on to that identity and start preparing for the second chapter in our life. I mean, when I look back at my career, I mean, I always considered myself a martial arts competitor, and that was what I was known for. But as I got older, I realized that, that I was slowing down. I was having a tougher time handling the younger guys, right? And probably a lot of them will get the best of me now, right? Even with less experience. And I think for a lot of us, especially if you've been a competitor or fighter all your life, it's hard to accept that your skills are no longer on par with the younger guys. And it's not easy to deal with, right? Decline in skills. But I think avoiding it is probably one of the worst things that you can do, and not accepting that, age is a part of life. And for me, I didn't want to think about getting old, so I avoided the subject. I pretty much was in denial. And like I said, it caused more anxiety, but also caused more pressure for me to fulfill my dreams. And I can understand now why athletes now, when they have such a hard time retiring from sport, everyone tells them, hey, you should retire because you're old, you can't do the things that you want to. But it's not so easy to walk away. And when I think about the sports icons and all that, and the martial arts, the martial arts are quite funny, because all the sports icons, they all have to retire because of age. They can't perform as like they used to. But for some reason, the kung fu movies, they always have the old master beating everybody up in the village. And that never happens in real life, right? We all have to retire because we get old. And I think the whole process that I placed so much emphasis on when I was younger, winning at all costs, and I realized that all the medals, all those accolades, they don't really mean anything, not to me anymore as I got older, because I think when you think about, your own death, you think about the people who are going to attend your funeral. In the eulogy, they're not going to talk about like, that you had 6 cars and a bunch of mansions. They're going to talk about your character and how you lived and how you touched everyone's lives. And I think that's what you want to take into account. And I think when I accepted aging and death, instead of trying to fight it, it brought me a sense of peace. And it also allowed me to plan for the second part of my life, instead of worrying about all these things that were eventually going to happen. I started to think about how would I enjoy this second part of life. And it also allowed me to take things less seriously. I used to be quite uptight about a lot of things, and sometimes I get a little bit temperamental, right? But it really opened up my mind to really free up the possibilities. So I would think about traveling the world and starting new businesses and new ventures that don't stress me out, and maybe take a class, maybe meet some new people, open up your imagination. I even thought of taking up pickleball the other day, and I never thought, I was horrible at racket sports, but I'm willing to learn, and who knows, maybe I might meet some new, fun, interesting people, right? So it's made me more free. It's made me less anxious. It's made me embrace death as a natural part of life, and something that can't be avoided. So instead of chasing stuff now, I really chase things that bring me joy and meaning, and I can care less about what others think and more about maximizing my time on earth. I mean, I thought about this YouTube channel, and there's people that friends of mine like saying, well, I don't know if I can start a YouTube channel because I'm worried about the criticism I'm going to get. You know what, I can care less, right? And as a martial artist, you got to have thick skin to get into the ring and to compete, and to go through decades of injuries and so forth. So what's some random person with 2 subscribers on their YouTube, criticizing you, gonna really do to someone like myself, or even to yourself? I mean, like, who cares? I mean, at least you're on there on YouTube, or you're doing a side hustle. At least you're doing something, because at least if something comes out of it, then you give it your best shot, right? Instead of sitting back and doing nothing. And I think that's the most important thing, is to live your life, to see how far you can go in life, and in reaching your fullest potential. So my question to all of you is, if you had 1 year left today, what's really going to matter to you? What would you stop doing today, and what would you prioritize? I'd love to hear your comments below, so please feel free to like, comment, or share if you like my channel, and check out my next videos. All right, take care, and I will talk to you next time.